Hello Workforce Board members, partners, and staff. I'm Eric Wolf. This video briefing will give board members background information for their October discussion on revising and reapproving the Talent and Prosperity for All plan. We'll also briefly tee up the next planning issue on the horizon, review and reapproval of local workforce development area plans. Specifically, this video briefing covers a proposed timeline to review and reapprove the state plan and a proposal for local plan reviews, specific expectations in law that we know about the reapproval process ahead and what we just don't know yet as well. We'll discuss possible roles for TAP implementation committees in reviewing or reconsidering goals in the plan, and we'll provide a possible set of discussion questions for you to anchor your conversation in October. These questions align with your board packet write-up, and they're intended to generate a conversation. They may not be an exhaustive list of what comes up in discussion. Finally, we'll close out this video with a discussion on reapproving local plans, which will come in the spring. We'll be seeking guidance from the board on revising and reapproving the TAP plan at this October meeting, with board action on setting a reapproval process anticipated at your next meeting in November. Time's not quite of the essence for setting a process for local plan review and reapproval yet, but board action on that will likely come at the first of the year. So before we jump into the proposed timeline and some of the other content, we have some overarching parameters for the board to consider for this. First, TAP implementation is fully underway with a network of established committees, so recalibrating the direction may be easier than starting from whole cloth. Secondly, probably the most important conceptual question about updating TAP is whether the 4 strategic priorities in the plan are still the way in which the board would like to organize their work. That begs the follow-up question of whether the goals underneath those strategies are still the right goals. Third, how intensely would the board like staff to engage local partners as the review comes together? In TAP's previous edition, we had the luxury of road testing the plan in a series of public forums, which seems impractical for the short time frame of this update. And finally, bear in mind that there are no new resources coming to support this review process or reapproval of the plan, so we'll have to draw staff time and resources away from other implementation efforts and agency work. Setting some guardrails around the upcoming timeline, we'll begin with this October's meeting and our discussion, and end on April 1st, which is the anticipated date for submission of a revised plan. At your November meeting, staff anticipates the board will act to specify desired new directions or ideas to be explored through the TAP review process. We propose that Workforce Board staff then work with an interagency review and drafting team through December and January to prepare a first round of considerations for TAP modification. The board would provide direction or approval at a subsequent special board meeting, at which point the plan would be released for public comment before the board formally approves the plan in March 2018. This would set us up for the April 1st submission deadline. We haven't received official directive from our federal agencies on a submission date or a process for submission. We've heard some discussion that we'll be using the same portal we used last time and that April 1st is the most likely due date. You might remember that the TAP plan has a few additions, representing a split of the gigantic version containing sections specific to each partner program. The first 90 or so pages of the TAP plan constituted the plan's strategic component, where we set the stage with information on specific economic and workforce conditions in Washington. We analyze the strengths and weaknesses of our system. We set the board's goals for the system and also the strategy to achieve those goals. Today's presentation is really going to zoom in on updating this strategic portion of the plan, where we have a clearer picture of what the expectations are of our system going into this update. The operational parts of the plan consist of program-specific compliance requirements. We'll be working with our agency partners to update what's required as we receive more guidance. That is really what constituted about 400 pages of the gigantic version of the TAP plan. So here's what we know has to be revised in TAP based on either the law or federal regulations. We're going to have to do an update of our analysis of economic conditions in state to reflect 2018's conditions. We'll have to update unemployment data to 2018. We'll be looking at any new labor market trends that have developed in the last 2 years. We have another opportunity to analyze the strengths and weaknesses of our workforce system. and also describe our state's vision and goals for the system itself. And then finally, the strategy that the board sets forth in order to attain those goals. We don't really have to start from scratch. We can start with what we've already built in 2016. There's no expectation that we're writing a new plan. What this practically means is this is a 2-year checkpoint for us to really determine whether or not the goals and vision within TAP are still the direction the board wants to travel in to meet 2018's realities. So TAP is organized around 4 overarching strategic priorities. One of the main questions we'll be asking in October is, does this still seem to be the right organizing framework? We aren't going to go into great detail on these 4 priorities in this video or the goals underneath each priority, but to jog your memory, you can consult your board materials for both a TAP goals handout, which is this thing in the middle. It has all the goals as they were written out in the TAP plan itself in 2016. We've also included for your review an executive summary of TAP itself. It's the 11-page super distilled down version of the plan that should provide more than enough background for the discussion. And as you consult the TAP goals handout, board members will also want to consider how goals have been assigned out to each of the board's 6 different TAP implementation committees, and how each committee might help the board identify, prioritize, or reimagine TAP goals as appropriate. So we'll end this section with 4 key questions that staff are suggesting to kick off your discussion at the October meeting. These are meant to spark conversation and generate ideas. Ultimately, you'll provide direction to staff on what to prepare for board action at the November meeting. In November, you'll decide on the plan review process and the guidelines themselves. So here are the questions that we came up with. First, are TAP's current goals in need of any updates or amendments? This is a very 30,000-foot question. Second, are there current TAP goals that should be removed or considered accomplished? Third, are there any new goals that we need to be incorporating into this next edition of TAP? And fourth, how might the board's focus on serving employer customers be more meaningfully incorporated into the TAP goals? So next steps, at your November meeting, we anticipate the board will act to specify desired new directions or ideas to be explored through the TAP review process. Staff anticipates that the board will act in November also on creating a final plan, set of review questions or something similar, as well as guidelines to move forward with updating the TAP plan. We'll also look at a proposed timeline that will take us through April 1st so we can put some checkpoints in place and make sure we're on track. So we'll be brief on discussing the next issue on the planning horizon, which is reviewing and reapproving local workforce area plans. We've already received a few questions from our local counterparts, so we want to begin a conversation with the board so we can vision out what an appropriate approval process is going to look like in the spring and summer of next year. The federal regulations are pretty clear about minimum components and local plans that will need to be updated to reflect 2018 economic conditions. There are a few additional requirements for local boards to address changes in structure of their local board, or also to revise any of their local goals to meet their own performance targets for the coming 2-year period. There are some major considerations the board should be aware of as they begin to think about a local plan review process. Specifically, there's a lot of disruption in terms of what our local counterparts are working on right now in the system. There are no new resources for our local counterparts to do their own review or reapproval of their plans, so resource constraints are a major thing to keep in mind. A second issue is that much of the system's design and also the way the system will be resourced in its one-stops is still up in the air, as memoranda of understanding are still under negotiation locally. But the big questions for the board really to consider as we talk about a local plan review process are how would you really like to proceed on that process? Does it need to be as high a touch or intense a process, or can we perhaps come up with a list of short review and reapproval questions for our local partners to respond to? And beyond the required elements and local plans that have to be updated based on what we know from the law and the regulations, are there other questions or priorities the board wants to explore with our local counterparts as we go about the plan reapproval process. So I'll close with that. Thanks for listening. I look forward to our discussion at the October board meeting. You can reach me at either this phone number or at my email address if you have any questions. Have a good one.